Hi, Jodi. Welcome to the Work of Warriors. I'm so glad you're here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited to dive in and chat with you.
Awesome. So, as you know, the Work of Warriors is a podcast dedicated to bringing mental wellness to the entertainment industry.
Mm.
And I just believe there's this notion, no matter what we're doing, if we have big goals, if we're doing big things, sometimes it's hard to know when to stop. And so a lot of people, a lot of my clients come to me because they are living big, their careers are big, they're burned out, they're frustrated.
Yeah.
But what I was fascinated by when I found you and your content is I think we're coming at this from almost opposite directions, but we are really trying to lead people to the same place, which is to live this life of joy and excitement and satisfaction and contentment and that looks different for everybody. But I love what you're doing with 4,000 Mondays. And I would just love it if you would introduce 4,000 Mondays and a bit of yourself to our listeners, so everybody listening knows exactly what you're doing because it's amazing.
Love it. And we can piece together how your point, I love how you've positioned it as we're coming at it from opposite ends. Let's talk. Well, you've alluded to 4,000 Mondays, and I will, break any mystique there. What is that about? It is that we roughly get 4,000 weeks on the planet, I guess, depending what you believe. And so I call it 4,000 Mondays because, of course, Mondays just have way more feelings. And that is a good litmus test for us to determine when I wake up on a Monday, am I feeling raring to go for this week of my life? Or am I feeling like I want to stay in bed or some variation of the two? And so I work with mostly at this point groups and teams. I do keynotes and workshops to talk about how many Mondays do you have left and how then, therefore, do you want to make the most of that unfortunately diminishing amount of time. And I used to do a ton of one-on-one coaching. I do still do a tiny little bit of it. And I'm writing. My book is coming out in the spring. And I'm just, trying to love my own life while I'm fitting in, hoping other people make the most of their time too.
Right. I love that so much. Would you be willing to share a bit of how you got here? How did you come to this? I know I've seen your TED Talk. I encourage all of our listeners to go watch it. It's fantastic. And I know when people hear death, only so many Mondays, only so many weeks, and it's scary, but you make it so fun and so realistic, and you bring so much hope to the
Oh,
life that we have.
oh,
So can you just share a little bit of how did you get here? How did this come to you? How did you get here?
yeah. Okay, happy to. Yeah, I can put it in context because I do agree with you that most people would immediately think, great, thanks, Kim. The show about death. How fast can I press the back button on this podcast? But wait, there's more. There's so much. It gets better. So I was working corporately for 17 years in executive roles, and life was good and great, and kind of until it wasn't. And I was looking for something new and different. And for me, that meant getting into executive coaching and leadership development. And do you ever have a time where you do something and it's a good move? And so for that, for me, it's been 10 years since I left my corporate roles. It has been definitely a positive move, but there was something that was niggling on the back of my mind. And it became a louder and louder voice. And it was this interest in our mortality. And because I've always been interested in this bizarre notion, that here we are, we're all just trying to make the most of this one life and we're all careening towards an inevitable end. I mean, I don't know. I fortunately find that amusing rather than morbid because it's ridiculous. And so I went to grad school at the University of Pennsylvania and I took the Master's of Applied Positive Psychology program. Most people are like, positive psychology, say what? And it's the scientific study of what makes life worth living. And in doing that, that cracked me wide open where I said, I'm going to do my thesis on this topic of mortality as a motivator. And I realized, oh my gosh, there's a whole bevy of information and research and existing stuff out there on this idea called temporal scarcity, which is how we see things that are rare or temporary as, having a higher value. So that's what our lives really are, limited time only situations. So by studying it, and to be honest, I think I needed it to be that kind of validated. It gave me the permission that I felt I needed in my mind to just make the change. And so I started 4,000 Mondays 3 years ago and have shifted. So I still do leadership development and coaching because I love it, but it's now very much 4,000 Mondays all day, all night long, every freaking Monday, every week till my bitter end, because I'm just so motivated to help us seize the day, seize the Mondays until we realize that, oh man, like they're going to come to an end. So let's just stuff it full of joy and meaning. Because I think that, well, we'll talk in a minute maybe about, the different continuums and ways we can look at life.
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I hear you, I'm like, I don't think your ending's going to be bitter. The bitter
Okay.
ending, like you bring so much joy. I don't think it'll be bitter. I took the
It'll be
quiz
the
on your
best guest
website.
party ever.
Right, you are. You're showing the rest of us how to do it, right? I took the quiz on your website and I think I scored well. I think I'm
Ooh.
living pretty good. So that was very exciting. But
Oh,
I just want
dynamo.
our listeners to understand that they're really, you have an assessment tool on how to know where people are at in that test, right? Like, are you living? Are you just scrolling through life? Are you just getting by? And
Yeah.
so I think anybody who spends a minute with you or even on your social media can feel the energy that you bring. And I guess a question that I have is, how do you know if someone is living,
Yeah.
right? Because again, I have clients who are living
Yeah.
so big, but they're still not, it's not meaningful, or they've lost their original meaning to life. How do you assess that?
Yeah. This is such a good question because this comes up in a lot of different ways, whether it's in a workshop I'm doing or not, because I do believe there is this notion that there's a prescribed way of living well, and I immediately slam on the brakes because I do talk a lot about what I call living an astonishing life, which sounds like that's the category that you're in from the quiz you took. Rock on.
Yeah.
And yet it's not like if you do these 9 things and you're not doing these 12 other things, therefore you're not living in an astonishing life and sucks to be you, you're in the dead zone. So, might as well just like bury yourself alive. That it is entirely relative. So one of the things that I've found most fascinating, and even in studying positive psychology, not even so much the mortality part of it that I love, but the subjective life satisfaction scales, is that we all have an innate knowing of how we're doing. And we just need to be given sometimes just a few questions or even the good old like scale of 1 to 10 situation to know. And so your entertainment clients, they're living larger than the rest of us mere mortals. And so for them, they may be living a life that other people are thinking, oh, if I could just get 10 minutes of it. But again, it is just entirely relative, right? So someone that I will meet will say, I really just like a quiet, lovely life. I want it to be peaceful and zen. And I just like my simple pleasures. And then if they're getting enough simple pleasures and they're getting enough zen and peace and all the things they deem to be a good life for them, then they're like a 9 or 10 out of 10 on their life. And that might make your Hollywood client think, oh, poor you, honey bunny, like living your quiet life in the woods. Although maybe they fantasize about that too, I think.
Yeah.
But what you want and need is different from what someone else does. So I don't outwardly assess by judgment. I get people describing for themselves. Am I living with enough fun? Am I living with enough purpose? And a bunch of questions in and around those 2 continuums. And that's what gets people thinking, this part might be okay, but this part might be a little flatlined. And what do I want to do about it? So I hope I've stressed the point that it is very much about your version's different than mine. That's different from, Tom Cruise.
Oh gosh, I think that's probably one of the most important things that you could have said, because the next question I had was, where do you find in your research and your work with all these clients and teams and whatnot, where are people getting their assessment without your questions? Where do you think the general population gets the definition of what is a great life?
Oh gosh, it's a scary, dark answer, right? I think it's scarier than death. I think it's social media, right? It's comparison, compare and despair. I think that we size ourselves up, our lot in life. We could be having a just fine day. And then we see someone else doing something that we might long to be doing, or driving a car that we might have once thought, and all of a sudden now the thing we had wasn't so good, or we were already feeling super crap to begin with, and now we just dug down 7 layers deeper. So I think that the norms, and I don't mean to totally, rain on social media. It's pretty much, it's pervasive. It's around us, right?
Sure.
If you live in a society, you are being inculcated into it. And this is what is supposed to be a good life, and this is what is not. And usually there are some metrics around the good life, including some travel, some fun experiences. Usually there is an acceptance of social relationships. That's more of an Eastern expectation, that you're just going to be in a tribe of your people. But there are, even if you're working in a workplace, even if it's remote, you're going to be accepting those signals about what is good or not. It's what does your boss do on his or her vacation? That's setting the norm about, this is how we spend our time. This is what makes a good, is somebody going out and yachting this weekend? Well, I guess that's what I should be yearning for. So left to our own devices, I think we could do just fine. But if we just unfortunately don't live alone, fortunately we don't live alone.
Do you have a practice that you go through because like you said, we're human, we all do it. We all have this comparison trap. Do you have a practice that you might go through if you catch yourself in there, like, I should have a yacht, or, the trip to Hawaii wasn't good enough, I should be going, to Bali. Like,
yeah.
How do you, like, if you catch yourself there, what do you do that other people might be able to incorporate?
Yeah, I do. What comes to mind are 3 specific things. So one is just simply like, avoid the stimulus that is causing pain. And so I'll stop scrolling. If for some reason, for me, it's not so much in social media, because I've learned to really love Instagram. That's kind of pretty much the only place I am. I'm on LinkedIn too. But okay, so LinkedIn's a good example, because there are other professionals. And I see people that I already know and like, and then I'm like, you're doing that thing, or you're speaking at that event. And I get the little feelings going on. And, if I was super mature and evolved, would just have a more therapeutic moment with myself. But my first answer is, I'm going to stop scrolling. I don't need to fill my head with more feelings of inadequacy. And so just number 1, eliminate that thing. So that's just easy peasy. The next step is slightly more evolved, and a little bit more of the, foundations of stop and practice gratitude. Like, it is a fascinating reflex we can initiate, which is just looking around and finding something. I'm grateful that, XYZ, and it could be filling in something silly, right? I'm grateful that we're ordering Thai food on Friday, and that's something to look forward to, and it's fun. Or I'm grateful that I'm happy, I'm healthy, and I have a family, most of whom care about me, and things are pretty good. So number 1, just any sprinkling of gratitude will change your perception of life in that moment. And then number 3 is where I'm going to just always like flash the lights. Memento mori, which is remembering we're going to die. Stop and say, in the grand freaking scheme of things, she got that speaking gig and I didn't. Or her hair looks way better than mine ever will. And you know what? I'm alive. Like, maybe I have some years to figure out how to do my hair, or maybe I have some years to figure out, but I get to be here, and it helps to size the problem beautifully in that moment of like, let's not sweat the small stuff. Because so many people I've worked with who've had those brushes with death, they don't care about the trivial stuff as much. And so I try to put myself back in that mindset that I've never been fortunate enough to have a precipice with death moment. I don't want one, but I know it would be lovely after. I try and put myself in that mindset.
Yeah, I love that. And the second 2 that you mentioned, practicing gratitude, and then that just spills into, I'm so grateful I get to be here. And
Yes.
It seems cliche, but it really is true. Like, if you woke up today, you have so much to be grateful for. And we lose sight of that with what you've talked about with social media, other people impacting our opinions, and, how we rate ourselves, if you will. So I think that that's so powerful.
Yeah.
And I know that you said you haven't had one of those big experiences, but you've had some experiences of not living to how you live now. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share a little bit of that.
I'm happy to. Yeah. Anything that can help jostle someone else and help someone else see, like, normalize all of the cacophony of crap that as humans we go through.
Yes.
I could
Because
have
it is. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I think that is the human experience. And there are so many people walking around thinking it's personal, thinking they have bad luck, thinking they're cursed, and that if they just do that thing, that's a lot
Mhm.
of, the space that I work in. If I just
Mhm.
win that award, if I get on that stage, if I get that gig, if I get the label, whatever, then
Right.
I won't have that human experience. And it
Yes.
doesn't go away. And I
No,
just
it
think we need
doesn't.
to talk about that.
Yes. Well, what you just described is what they say in psychological science is called destination addiction. It's that idea that my happiness resides elsewhere and it's contingent upon, again, that thing happening, the Emmy or the home or that really, the boyfriend that looks like this or whatever. And I think we delude ourselves really quite brilliantly, don't we? And actually believing it. I mean, I think most of us in a salient moment would stop and say, okay, I kind of really know that like there might be some chinks in the armor. Like if the morning I wake up after the Oscar, in addition to feeling hungover, like my life isn't, well, actually, I can understand how life can change because of things, but
Sure.
it's not the antidote. So we might rationally know it, but we do a good job of trying to convince ourselves of that. And that
Yeah.
is therein lies the risk. Like there's this concept called hedonic adaptation. Again,
Mhm.
back to psychology. And it's that we adapt just so reliably to all of the great things that happen to us. And the good news is that we adapt to the crappy things too. So the situations we might find ourselves in, there's research around if you become a paraplegic or if you win the lottery, pretty much like 18 months later, both parties are just about as happy or miserable as they were before their
Sure.
life-changing event.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, this destination addiction's a thing. And back to your question, I lived I didn't live the full width and depth of my life for a lot of time. One part was the easy peasy thing, which most of us have been through, which is that, I was in a job that I didn't love and I felt stuck. Well, but that does take courage to get out of that situation and to see that it's okay to start over, and that it is always worth it. There's not been a single client I've worked with who has made the big gutsy change, even maybe gone back to school or even lost their status and started off at the low point on the totem pole and regretted it. Everybody that I've worked with or personally known um, just wishes they did it sooner. So for me, there was the job. And then I suffered from eating disorders for a decade. And man, I look back now and I think about how I know I was doing it now. I was just trying to cope. I like things just so and in control, and eating disorders create that feeling that things are in control in many ways. So it satisfied a need in one way. And it's just a sad time when I recognized that I wasn't going out because I was preferring to stay home and binge and purge, or I knew that I had, there were other opportunities I could go for. I could play full out, but this was just it was a compulsion. It was a trap. And so I I know when I compare this to all the other people out there who have our own versions of those trials and tribulations, it could be that the ways we try to cope, we're clever. It might just be like the shopping addiction. Like I know how good it feels to just press that add to cart. It could be a little bit more drinking than you maybe, well, know is good for you. And then all of a sudden that's just, that might escalate a little bit. I know a lot of people with some gambling issues, sex addiction, ways that we just try we often try and fill the void of meaninglessness. And
Yes.
that's a big thing
Say
that
more. Say more.
right. Like there's this concept that I've fallen for called the existential vacuum. And yes, you can believe I did draw a vacuum cleaner because it needed to be drawn and to doodle alongside an article I wrote on this. But it's this idea that for many of us, we don't necessarily know it, but we are lacking meaning. And this goes back to something you said at the beginning of our chat, where a lot of your successful entertainment clients, they have a lot of vitality in their lives, right? So they're living wide, all sorts of pleasure and experiences and travels and front of the plane, if not their own plane, and just all the cool, fun joys and the things that we see on social media typically, right? They've got a lot of that, but the dearth can come in the spectrum of meaning and purpose. And so this existential vacuum highlights where we don't have that sense of meaning and purpose in our lives. And there is a phenomenon that can exist where when we're left with open periods of time. So for many of us who work like a typical Monday to Friday, the weekend can sometimes feel full of anxiety because we're all of a sudden faced with this like 48-hour runway of, I don't really have much to do unless I'm working. And I don't have any other real purpose. And even my work may or may not be making me feel like I'm adding any kind of meaning or making a dent in the world or whatever.
Yeah.
But back to, again, your main clientele, there are gaps between jobs, right? So I've worked with people in your field too, where it's like you're hopping from one significant thing to the next, but there could just be this like tumbleweed blowing through your life for a couple months. And that you're staring down this void of, what am I doing? Like, surely there's more. What am I here for? What am I really contributing? And those are big questions, of course. And they deserve to be analyzed and answered, but that can be really existentially rocking to us. It really does rock our world. It's one of the existential threats, they call them, of which there are a bunch. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, when you said we trick ourselves brilliantly, and, you were talking about some of the common struggles that people have,
Mm.
whether it's, a sex addiction or shopping. And I think it's insidious too, when you run to Target and you come home with a bunch of plastic crap and you're like,
Oh.
oh, this is going to, Goodwill, or it's going in the trash, or, like, I'm just going to sit on the couch for a minute. I just need a break. And then it's 3 hours later. And
Yeah.
I just think, like,
Yeah.
sometimes we're sleeping. And one thing that I try to tell myself is, especially with purchasing, and to not try to fill those, seemingly meaningless moments,
Yeah.
is it either needs to feed me well or change my life for the better.
Ooh. So it either needs to feed me now or
Feed
change
me
my life.
well.
Well, okay.
Yeah. So, like, not Oreos.
I
But,
mean, in
like,
moderation, but yeah.
right. But not like, spending extra money at the farmer's market
Mm.
feels wise.
Mm.
But grabbing, the Doritos, the Oreos, the soda, the
Yeah.
excess
Yep.
in hopes, and, a subconscious hope that it's going to make us feel better, or
Yeah.
picking up those $1 items that are actually like $4 and $5,
Yes.
But it's from those little things to the grandiose things of, I have to have a better car, or a
Mhm.
bigger house, or, a better job, whatever it might
Mhm.
be.
Mhm.
And so, I'm just wondering,
Mm.
do you have anything to offer our listeners in
Mm.
regards to,
Mm.
how do you connect with your worth? Because as a
Yeah.
mental wellness coach, and,
Mm.
you work in psychology, like, I get into the story, I get
Mm.
into the personality, I get
Mm.
into trauma, and lots of
Mhm.
untethering and unhooking.
Yeah.
But, for people who have done that work, or aren't doing, aren't ready to do that work, what it might be, but how do
Yeah.
you just accept the fact that you are worthy of a
Mm.
life that you decide
Mhm.
what it means, that you get to define what it means to be successful?
Mm. I love the
How do
way.
I
Yeah.
know that I'm worth that?
Yes. That's so rich. A couple things come to my mind off the top. And one, going back to those inquisitive things you can ask yourself to start to noodle around it. So on the resources page of my website, I think it's there. And if there's not, then I'll put it there. There should be what's called the meaning making assessment. And it should just be free. Click on it. It takes you to a PDF. And I don't know about you, but I always find it helpful when there is a bit of a breakdown of different categories. Okay, these are the different typical areas. It's based on research from what's called the sources of meaning in life. And I love looking at that, because I look at that and go, yeah, I've got nothing there, but I actually don't care about these areas. So I don't need to go find meaning there, because, for some people, they may say, right now, I am not that interested in finding meaning, maybe in spirituality. Maybe that's just not my bag. It may come later, maybe it can never come, doesn't matter. But meaning could be derived through like social relationships, for example. It could be through some sort of self-transcendence, like finding awe or wonder in an experience where you're just sort of swept off your feet, like if you look at the stars or you look in the Grand Canyon. It could be through the accomplishment, which is where many of us can get tripped up, right? Because that can be taken a little too far. But that sense of, I I created something. And that creates also this fun little thing called symbolic immortality, where I believe we're all walking around with a latent, like some of us have it super buried, fear of death. Some of us, it's super like right near the top. I mean, we just like barely scratch the surface and then it all comes exploding, right? So it's always on our mind somewhere. And I'm just trying to have it be consciously on our mind in a good way. But for many of us, we like to tamp down those fears by creating what's called symbolic immortality. So it could be just as simple as having kids that will endure beyond you, even when you know you're long gone. For many people who are creators, it could be making the movie so that 120 years from now, someone might watch your movie, or read the book you wrote. Or for non-creators, it could be donating money so that the new wing of the library is decked out or your park bench has your name on it, those types of things.
Yeah.
So there are sources of meaning. Step one to me is like, you could start to sniff around and say, this one is low on meaning, and that actually hurts my heart and my soul because I want it to mean more. Well, that's all we need. Like, awareness is the precursor to change. So that might be your opportunity to go, yeah, I know I need more social connection. Maybe the pandemic burst a bubble in all your social stuff. And so you know that maybe you need to get back because that gives you a sense of connection and meaning and purpose to be there for somebody, to look after their cat when they go away for the weekend, whatever that might be. And I say that in a silly way, but can I just size the prize for a sec? Because I believe we put so much pressure on ourselves that meaning and purpose have to be magnanimous. That it needs to be something that people, back to the seal of approval from, I don't know, strangers on social media. But like, we don't all have to save the children. We don't all have to start a nonprofit or do something Nobel Prize winning. For so many people, I feel like, number one, realizing that can just be this sigh of relief that, because many of us were just not wired or up, quite frankly, up for the giant task of like going and getting a government grant to like start to save water in the desert or something. Like you don't need, it can be something as simple as, and I've used this example before, but it's so perfect, I'm going to use it again. There was a woman I worked with who, after much fretting and self-judgment about, oh, but my purpose isn't big enough. It's like, all right, splash some cold water in your face, come back at it. It was, she came to this lovely purpose of, you know what? My purpose in life is to be the person that brightens people's days. Because she realized, and part of where we're going to go next, and because you asked this question and it came to me immediately, was when we tune into our strengths, that helps us innately feel like we're just stepping into something that's just real in us and it's purposeful. So for this woman, she was one of those sort of just magical, always exuded warmth, whether it was the barista that just loved being with her or the colleague or her son or whomever that she got to interact with. She just wanted to make their days bright. So she left them smiling and just in a bit of a better mood. And when she realized that, that helped her actually do better at work because she sold more widgets in her job and did all the things that, so I guess shifting now, when you're in touch with what you do best, and that's a long list, right? Because many of us, like I'd say 10, like pick 10 things that you're pretty darn great at, your signature strengths. And there's actually an online assessment for character strengths that I love telling everybody to go to. It's free. It's called viacharacter.org. So VIA stands for Values in Action, character.org. And it will give you, out of 25 universally researched character strengths, it'll tell you where you are, and do more of your top 5. If you do the things that you're talented at and you do more and more and more of them, it's energizing. And it makes you feel like you're being the true you that was plopped down on this earth to be that person. There's undeniable, like it oozes with meaning. Does that make sense? Like,
oh my gosh, right? It makes so much sense. And one thing that I love when you said be the true you, because I know so many of us, it's like we enter the world, be it our true selves, right? And life beats us up at some point, often many times. Yeah. And we spend our lives going around and outside of ourselves to find ourselves, to find, how am I supposed to be better? What am I supposed to be doing? What is my purpose?
Yes.
And I feel like one of the most powerful things that I do in my coaching is I just help people get back to who they were to begin with.
Oh, come back home, baby.
Your true you.
Yeah. Yeah.
That might be making sugar cookies.
Oh,
Like,
can
what
I have
brings
one?
joy? Oh, they're
Oh,
amazing. It's going to be my
yes.
retirement plan.
If you make them gluten-free, I'll be a regular.
Okay.
Yeah, I like your point. We deviate because, of course, you know what? And I try. I mean, I judge humanity hard because we're all so fabulously flawed.
Right.
Judge myself the worst, of course, and it's like, why do we do this shit to ourselves? Why do we do this stuff to ourselves?
Yes.
And yet, oh, you know what? Part of it is like the irony is like I'm one of the encouragers about let's be better versions of ourselves. Let's maximize. And so in this pursuit of more, and if I think the pursuit of more can be either lovely or it can be like one's foot in the grave, right? Because it can be energizing and exciting, and I want to reach my potential. And oh my goodness, the lid is blown off my potential. I didn't even know it could be that good. That's lovely. Or it could be like I'm never enough. I'm going to try,
Right.
and I'm going to run faster and harder, even though I'm injured, and I'm just going to keep
Right.
pushing. That sounds like a life not worth living, right?
Sure.
But in our pursuit of maybe a little bit more, I do think that it's easy to stray from the path and forget that,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, one of my gifts is being creative. And I just got to be creative more. I don't have to go over there and be this strategic intellectual at the office because I think that's what they value. What if I just came home and made more homemade greeting cards for my friends and family and mailed them out? And that makes me feel like $1 billion. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, like when you were talking about your true self, when we are self aware
Mm.
and we really get into understanding what our nervous system is telling us,
Mm.
and we understand what makes us feel alive, what makes us feel gross and heavy.
Oh,
And when you honor that, when you love yourself enough to honor that, going, I
yeah.
need to do more of that.
Oh, okay. I love this so
Yeah.
much because we're on the same language wavelength about what makes me feel most alive. Because in my world of like dead or alive, yes,
Yeah.
of course, there's a lot of middle ground, which is where most of us are living. But it's this like the simplicity of the question of what makes you feel most alive. And then it's
Yes.
like, get your pen and paper and write a long bullet point list because we actually have ways at our disposal that make us feel alive that we underestimate that it's just a silly little thing. Oh, but
Right.
our lives are just a bunch of silly things connected to each other. So why not just be more intentional about doing that silly thing on your lunch break that then might actually make you feel alive again? Like I spoke to a woman this morning. She was setting up a workshop I was doing. She's just lovely. And she goes, she was talking about not getting to sleep in, even though she has young kids. And she said, no, I want to wake up in the morning because I love my alone solo coffee ritual. And I love just standing outside with the dog and surmising the garden. Like I love that. And that makes her feel alive. And so could she, like many of us listening in right now, we go, oh, you know what? I think I'd rather just sleep in. Like if I could take that extra like 22 minutes of my life to sleep, that would make me feel better. But maybe you're missing out on the self-reflective coffee time, the dog, the looking over like there are opportunities that if we jot them out, if you sit down right now, okay, fine, when we're done talking, and write out all like just a laundry list of things that make you happy, but also just feel really alive, chances are maybe there's a bunch of them that you haven't done in a while. And oh, that's the golden chance. And these are not things like yachting necessarily. Unless if you have several yachts, then yacht away, my friend. And please invite me one time. But for the rest of us, it's making sugar cookies,
Yeah.
or it's like, oh, I'm going to pre-plan what I'm going to order for Thai on Friday, like I said. So simple things, easy
Well, I have
access.
something to share with you that I think you're going to love.
Okay.
So once a year, my niece comes. She's actually my great niece, but she just left a couple days ago. She's almost 9, and she comes once a year for Yes Week.
Pardon me?
Yes Week.
Say more.
We just say yes to whatever, within reason, of course. But it was a short Yes Week this year. But I mean, we covered so much ground in 72 hours, from, going to the trampoline park to making sugar cookies. Of course, we made homemade dog biscuits. And what I always reflect on is having I'm very fortunate to have a niece who I got to be a fun aunt to. And then I had my own child, and now he's,
Mm.
a teenager. And now I have a great niece. And I just feel so lucky to get to play
Oh,
in all these people's lives, because it fills me, right?
oh,
But I
oh.
can't think of a big, huge event that would really compare
Yeah.
to having no pressure, no sense of time,
Oh,
lots of laughter, lots of joy, lots of yeses, lots of mess, lots of color. Like that fills me up.
oh, oh, you're in tune with it. I can tell just listening to you. I love
Yeah.
this. And
Yeah.
everybody right now is going, when can my yes week be? And then just make sure
Yes.
that you stay away from heroin dealers because that'll be
Right.
off limits. But I
Yeah.
love this so much. And
But
what
can't we
you're
do
what
that
you're
for
pointing to,
ourselves?
yeah, yeah,
You don't have to have a 9-year-old niece.
yes,
You have
literally,
you.
yes.
You have you. You have yourself. Have a yes week, even a
Oh,
yes day.
well, do you not find so there's always this weird balancing act between yes and no? Because of course, there's a school of thought about we have to say no to things to have boundaries, and that we have to say yes to things in order to live life. And this, to me, falls more in that spectrum of widening our lives with more of the vitality.
Yeah,
And uh, I, it will always be a fine little balance, a little tiny little dance we play because, on one hand, sometimes we know that when someone says, "Would you like to go to the concert in the park?" that when we are just beat down, like crispy fried, burned out, like the right answer may be no, I would love to, but I just got to spend the night horizontal Netflix. Thank you. That's self-care. That's great. However, like I, I consistently choose the homebody route. I love home as more of an introvert. I got home decked out here. Like I could just like another pandemic could hit and I would be just fine, right? So if I'm invited to a concert in the park or if whomever invites me on their yacht, hello, uh, my inclination is like, oh, how can I pretend I'm busy and stay home? When the answer for a yes life is experience, go, do it. Even if you get seasick or even if the band is total trash, it'll be funny to laugh at later. Go do the thing. And chances are you go and it's actually quite invigorating and you get to leave early if you want to. And so that is about participating in your life. Um, for most of us, I think that we need to edge up that more than the saying no. For some of us, fine, you need to say no to carpooling or the things. Do that too. But
sure.
only we know where we can bust ourselves for being maybe just um, a little too careful with ourselves, dare I say.
Yeah, and what did you
Fun.
say just a second ago about something in your own life? Did you say you didn't say curtailing your own life?
Oh, hmm.
I don't recall what you
I don't
said.
remember the word, but it was in context about just like living small.
Well, I think the most important thing to address is living with vitality.
Mhm.
Also, is let your no be no.
Oh, that's good.
Let your no be no, but let your yeses be yes and have them crystal clear
Yeah.
based on only your definition of what it means to
Yeah.
live your
Ah,
best life.
okay. This is so brilliant because um, when we are aware of when we're maybe at our limit or when we just simply don't want to engage in the thing, like, no, thank you. I actually have no interest in joining that committee or XYZ. We can be kind with how we say it. But when we do offer a no, there is usually not just the feeling of relief, like, oh, thank God I don't have to help my friend move her mattress this weekend or whatever, but there's usually the feeling of that sort of like it's self satisfied in a really positive self image way of I stood up for myself, you know? And that then builds the confidence and self efficacy typically to then say, I'm the person that makes conscious choices in my life. I don't get roped into things because I'm a pleaser or because my self worth is contingent on other people liking me. Not that I speak from experience about any of this,
Me
but
either.
that, I get to say, unfortunately, I'm fully booked. Maybe even if I'm not. And then feel good about the fact that I looked after myself. And what am I going to fill the void with in the meet otherwise? Right. So we only have our freaking 4,000 weeks, hopefully more, but roughly. And so do we want to feel obligated? And then that leads to resentment when we do the things we don't want to do. I don't want a
Yeah.
life full of resentment.
Right.
I'm
And
thinking
it
about
takes away from those moments that live us to that lead us to that vitality, right?
exactly.
And I think of,
Exactly.
the funny, like, I think it's, it's a quote, but also I think that one of my favorite TikToks is, it's about boundaries. And it says, oh, I would, but I don't want to. Like, but understanding, I think when you say no, then you get to say yes to those things that fill you up. And again, not according to someone else's definition, not according to someone else's agenda. And I think the more successful you are,
Yeah.
regardless of what you're doing, there are more opinions and
Mm,
agendas
mm,
that may or may not have your best interest in mind. So
mhm.
knowing your values, knowing your boundaries, knowing what your yeses are,
Yeah.
knowing what makes you feel alive, knowing what your hard passes are, gives you a foundation to really just make the most of those
Mm,
4,000 Mondays.
mm, mm. I love the way you put all of that. Hear
Well, and
ye,
here,
hear ye.
thank you. Here's something I really want to circle back to also, and the importance of you deciding what your life, what your best life looks like. You were talking about
Mm,
the person living out in the woods, a quiet
mm,
life, right?
mm,
And I think, yes, a lot of people would say that sounds terrible. It sounds
mm,
scary. It sounds boring. But as a wellness coach and working in mental health,
mhm,
people who choose to maybe not continue their family lineage or to live out in a cabin in the woods,
mhm,
um, you know, I think we don't give enough credit to the
mm,
people who've just simply stopped
mm.
generational trauma
Yeah. Yeah.
by merely living
Yeah.
peacefully
Uh-huh.
and with their own sense of joy that doesn't
Mhm.
match maybe the overall general consensus. But I
Mm,
think that needs to be celebrated
mm.
because when you're peaceful and you're living in the woods, when you go into town and you go to the grocery store, I bet you're pretty cool to run into because you're not causing further harm.
Mm. That's such a great point. And again, on one hand, it's a little bit of a whatever floats your boat. So there's that whole thing of like, maybe it's living on a boat, maybe it is living in the woods, whatever that might be for you. I love that. And then to the point about you're better to interact with other people, there's this thing called social contagion theory. And it is so
Absolutely.
true. All of that we innately know that, the negative people rub off on us, but also the positive people do, or the different sort of states of being that when you show up, whether it is in town to get your can of beans or to go to your next meeting or to go to your next audition, the thing that just happened, you are carrying with you. It's like you reek of it. It's coming off you. So in the world of positive psychology, one of the things that we actively talk about are positive interventions, which is this notion that you can create your emotional state. And Barbara Fredrickson is kind of a master of this. This is mostly her work. This idea, she's got this broaden and build theory. So there are 10 major positive emotions. So there's like love, serenity, interest, which is like curiosity, pride, contentment, inspiration, the list goes on. If you're going in, for example, for a big audition, it behooves you, and one's amusement, which is one of my favorites, like while you're in the car or whatever, pull up your phone and watch a funny thing, or like get yourself talking to your friend that is going to maybe make you feel the most inspired. Rig your emotions. You can rig them, which then I always then by extension say you can rig your own happiness. If you put yourself into that state, you're going to be exuding that no matter what. So that's a sidebar on the bigger, more profound point you were making about, generational trauma, etc. I agree. Do what you need to do in order to live the life that lets you feel like, by the science of well-being, it's what makes you flourish, you know, rather than languish. Well, go for it. Now, I have to say there's one thing. This is like one caveat to living alone in the woods. As much as I don't like the woods, but living alone does sound lovely on many days to me. But one of the biggest tenets of the science of well-being, positive psychology, is that almost all roads lead back to positive, healthy relationships with other people. And one of the founders
Amen.
of the field, his name was Chris Peterson, may he rest in peace. He made a comment and said that when asked to distill positive psychology down to as few words as possible, what could you say? He said, other people matter. And then he said, there may be no happy hermits. And so as a hermit, like a wannabe hermit, damn it, there's no chance for me to be happy if I live alone. All right, fine. All right. I'm going to buck up and go to the concert in the park.
Yeah. Yeah. But when you travel into town and get your can of beans, I'm sure you make quite a difference.
Oh, I'm a joy to be around.
I can tell. I agree. I agree. Yeah, no, I think it's important to, just to think about also, like you said, that was kind of a segue, but also that, that generational trauma piece. If you're listening to this and you feel for whatever reason, like that's not for me, my stance is going to be there's something that's still unhealed, something that's been unprocessed, something has you stuck. And we can figure out what that is and we can get you unstuck. But that's from my perspective. What would be yours if someone is listening and like, what are you talking about? That's not for me.
Yeah.
That just tends to languish.
Yeah. Well, you are relating that, back to our default settings. Sometimes some of us are naturally more optimistic, believe in a hopeful future. Some of us are just naturally pessimistic, believe that things are going to be kind of doomy and gloomy. And so we do have some wiring that may predicate that. And not to mention circumstance, which sounds like maybe some of what you're talking about, which is maybe overt traumatic situations, or even just, like you said, it's generational. One of the things I've come to realize in my giddy pursuit of having everybody live fully before they die, because just in case you missed it, we're all totally going to die. I thought that was clear. One of the things
it is now.
We should put font on the screen. One of the things I've noticed is that you need to want it yourself. So as much as I might want for someone to live wide and deep, whatever that means for them, no pressure about how it needs to look and feel and taste and sound. But some people don't have a desire to make a change. And I've had to reluctantly come to accept, as somebody who likes to help others in service of this, that I can't want it more than they want it. And so number one, I think some of it is just, there needs to be a bit of a nudge and a need. And I think that for many of us, trauma can be the nudge that is necessary to initiate a change. So change rarely happens. This is true in nature and with humans, where just all of a sudden you wake up one day with sort of a desire for it. Often there's an impetus, like something's got to push you, and it's usually discomfort. Or it's a desire to leave a state like homeostasis, leave something that is super crappy to get to something better, rather than just to go pursue something good. So it's just there's already a funny vibe going on, I think, with our tendencies to avoid pain rather than seek pleasure.
I have a word that I use to describe that.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
What's that?
I believe it's an invitation. It just, for me, it feels like an invitation. It feels like an opportunity.
Ooh.
And I think the world would have us believe it's, oh no, it's not supposed to be this way.
Yes.
What if it is?
Oh, well, now you're hitting on something that I love, which is this notion of equanimity, which is like that sense of acceptance that it is what it is in some ways. And I'm going to be very careful. We have so much control, right, to design our 5-minute increments, our days, our lunch, our lives. And yet good things happen. Bad things happen. The medley in between happens. And if we can practice equanimity, which is a little bit more than mindfulness, it's just sort of like I think it's like, the big sister of it or something. Those are clearly not scientific words, but that ability to sit back and nod and observe and not cloud our lives with the judgment associated with that is so bad. I need to fix it. This is horrible. This is what this means. Because we always want to make meaning out of everything in life, unfortunately, sometimes. Or even to look at the good thing, like, oh my gosh, I was just selected for this role. And this is going to be this is the best thing ever. And what happens though, is that then we start to cling on to that. We can become almost addicted to that feeling, but we then start to crave more of it, which then inevitably causes us more distress, right? Because it's the clamoring for that next thing that feels as good. Back to heroin.
Right.
that ends up also not serving us. And so can we be equanimous and just sit back and say, these things are happening. I'm making a lot of them happen, and I'm proud of the work I put towards this. This thing was just kind of crap luck. And yet I can observe it. I can watch it. I can accept it and not wreck this moment if it's good or blow it up if it's bad by just accepting like this is life. And I think for many of us, for however many Mondays we have left, the faster and more fervently we can start to adopt that, I think that makes our lives easier.
Yeah.
More at peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that we do have some power and control over the life that we create. But I have a dear friend who was a chemo nurse,
Mm.
and she would say, control what you can and flow like water with the rest.
Oh,
And I
oh,
love that.
yeah. I like that too. Yeah.
And just trust the unfolding.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, the trust, I think, relates back in some ways to our discussion about gratitude. You
Yeah.
know, that there's a funny little thing that happens with being grateful, and then by extension being grateful to be alive, is that it tends to melt the little icebergs, you know, of those fears that we have that do tend to show up as like a desire to control is really just because we're scared, right? Or to relinquish that sort of feeling of control and power. But when we stop and say, okay, yes, and also over here, I have a freaking heartbeat. Like I'm here right now. Yes, this part is a total unmitigated shit show. And yet there are gifts that I'll talk about later. I'm sure that they emerge because we all, I mean, I don't want to skip too fast to like post-traumatic growth, but goodness comes from garbage. But that I get to be here. And yes, this is part of the ride. And so I'm buckled up. Like I can take this. I've dealt with worse before, or maybe not, but now at least I'm a freaking pioneer in my own life and I can ride this wave. Mixing
Right.
metaphors galore. This is ridiculous.
I forgot what I was going to say.
You know what? Me
You're very
too.
funny. Did
Wait, all
you?
I know, wait, we're talking about death. Oh my God, when in doubt.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about death. Yes, we're all going to die. Have we made that clear?
Reminder.
Are you familiar at all with the Enneagram?
A little bit. I don't know what the numbers or whatever mean, so keep going.
Well, I was just going to say I'm in a dependent personality, and so I'm an Enneagram 6 pattern.
Okay.
My worst case scenario skills are off the charts. So
Oh,
it has
wow.
been a blessing and a curse because I'm
Mhm.
always like I just naturally have this gift of what could go wrong. When
Yes.
people say like, "What's the worst that could happen?" I'm like, I have a lot of answers to that question. So be
Like,
careful what you ask me. But it's
should I turn to
also
page
really
17?
right. But it's also been a gift because
Mm.
it does keep that, those limited Mondays, that limited time. It's like we're running out of time. I'm
Yeah.
running out of time. I want to do the things. And there is
Yeah.
the balance, like to not be reckless, but
Mm.
it's been a gift as well. And I do remember what I was gonna say before when you were talking about just life and the unfolding is one thing that's helped me is to remember it's not personal,
Hmm.
right? It's to be human is not personal when things happen, when tragedy happens, when
Yeah.
it's just the human experience.
Yes.
And
Oh.
there's no amount of scrolling on our phones that's going to make that go away. There's no amount of binging on whatever it is you like to binge on that's going
Mhm.
to make that go away. There's no amount of success that's
Yeah.
going to make that go away. And so if you can embrace that,
Yeah.
and if you can embrace yourself and know that you are worthy of an abundant life full of vitality and that
Yeah.
your time is limited and you can celebrate your life and yourself in a loving way, it just makes you also, I think, a better human. It makes you more fun to work with, easier to
Mm.
work with. The people that are in your life benefit from that. And it
Yeah.
has this ripple effect, right?
Ripple. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. You influence other people to think, oh, I like your way of being. I might emulate that a little bit. You seem pretty kind of cool with rolling with the punches. Like, none of us actively signed up to be alive, but
Right.
we know by now as adults that again, like this is what we unwittingly signed up for. And yes, other than your penchant for catastrophizing, which is what we call it in the world of psychology, I get it. And
I'm really good at it.
you have a gift, my look at you.
I've learned to have fun with it. Like I
Yeah.
literally, I don't think I get scared about it anymore. It's just like, oh, I'm doing that thing again. Yeah.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
almost
Well,
comical.
yeah, that can sometimes put a fork in it, right? Like
Yeah.
you bust yourself. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a wild ride. And
Yeah.
the more many of us think that if you put yourself out there, and I talk about participating in life, and it means maybe some fear or rejection in some ways. So there's a risk reward ratio about getting up and off the couch and getting out there and trying, going for the improv class that you wouldn't have done, or trying and taking new lessons over here, or putting up a dating profile, or doing the things that, here's the thing, when we know deep down that it's going to give us a shot at more, back to the more in the good way, not in the
Right.
out of breath striving way.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's like, all roads for me lead back to the deathbed regret. If at the end, let's imagine it was sort of soonish, you were horizontal and you were thinking, man, these were some good times. However, I wished I had done more of XYZ. That is, it's true based on research. We regret the things that we didn't take action on, the paths not taken, more than the silly things that we did and we just regret because it was, stupid that we,
Yeah.
did
Or
that
if we
dumb
made a
thing.
mistake. Yeah.
Right. So is there a thing that you would think, man, like I wished I'd done the improv class. Like that would have been kind of cool. And that may not take up all the airtime on your deathbed, but as an example, if it was a bullet point, if it would be there, that's then I think that's back to that, what I hope ends up being a little bit of an impetus, because again, time's ticking, that go sign up, just give it a go. And if it will feel awkward or embarrassing. But that again is part of the ride. And it means what it does is it helps us to reframe all the other experiences that happened to us. So there's a difference between, I signed up for improv and it was a colossal disaster, for example. I really do want to try improv, but that happened. Well, that was of my doing. And you know what? Good for me. I tried. The really good you would get back on the horse, but maybe not. The other thing is that stuff's going to happen to you, right? Like there may be a lawsuit against you that you did not expect. And then you're going to have to ride that wave. So the more confidence you build in saying, I do hard things and I give them a go and I give it a try and I'm okay to ride through feeling a bit rejected, or feeling like an idiot on the stage, or all the things, that builds the muscle of, you know what? I got this.
Yeah. Well, you're describing resiliency.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
We think mental health and mental wellness is about being happy all the time. And it's really not. It's about knowing I can handle whatever comes my way and I'll be okay one way or the other. This is happening for me, not to me. And I've done a lot of work to get here.
Yeah.
And I'm resilient and it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that.
So in the quiz that I took on your website, I believe I have 1,600 and some change Mondays left.
Okay.
And so I encourage everybody to go. I was like, even though I followed you, even though I've watched your TED Talk, I was really surprised by what that felt like. And I was like,
what did it feel like?
It felt like, okay, this is I know it's not exact. It could be less, it could be more. But it inspired me just to make meaning. Just, not to go do everything, not to be risky, not to overwork myself, not to burn out, but to live a life that's true to me, true to my family, and true to, what I want to do with my career. And it really felt amazing. And I'm really excited about the work that you're doing. And I just wonder, is there anything? Well, no, I have one more thing I wanted to ask you. I wanted to tell you, because I wanted to know if you would agree. I've talked about this with someone else on another episode, where it's an amazing feeling when you get to a point in your life where you feel like the rest, that's what I was thinking about with the 1,600 Mondays left. When you feel like the rest is bonus, that's an amazing feeling.
Oh,
And I would love that for more people to go, I really have done a lot. And again, that's personal definition.
Yep.
I haven't
Oh,
been to Bali, but I've done a lot of really cool things that have been very meaningful to me and have
yeah.
filled my spirit and enhanced my relationships and things that I just tuck away in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And they may be completely irrelevant and meaningless to the next person, but to me, they're
Mm-hmm.
special. And then when you hit that point, you're like, if I'm on my deathbed,
Mm-hmm.
I feel really good. I feel like I've made an impact. I
Mm.
feel like I've done and continue to do what I've been put here to do. I want to do more of it,
Yeah.
but what a ride. And just wanting that for more people.
Oh, you're describing a friend of mine, her dad was diagnosed with late stage cancer, and she and her sisters assumed that he was going to want to do a bunch of different things. He said, no, you know what? I've lived my life. Like, I feel like I've done what I want to do. I just want to spend time with you and your sisters and maybe a bit of golf while I can. We're good. And so my dad calls it playing with house money. He has negative 280 Mondays left to live. And yeah, meaning he's over the average age that men live till.
Wow.
And he's, of that, like I'm good. And it's kind of like you said, getting to the end on the deathbed and be like, peace out.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love the bonus idea. I think that's a beautiful one.
Yeah. And I mean, would you agree that people who maybe aren't in touch with the inevitable limited time are also maybe prone to more apathy?
Research shows that, yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's a direct correlation between even, so the extent that when you get to the end and you feel like you killed it in a good way, then typically you're more at peace and your anxiety is way dissipated. Conversely, if you get to the end and you feel like, oh my gosh, there's all these things unlived, I haven't done this or that, or that, or that, and the list goes on, then they tend to be clearly more anxious about this feeling of the coulda, shoulda, woulda. Is the way I just like distill it. So to live a life now that feels more at peace, even if you are consciously or unconsciously aware of any kind of anxiety around death, one of the best antidotes to that is just to go out and freaking start living. Because that then mitigates some of that feeling of, have I not done this life justice? Because that is a fear for many of us.
Yeah. I was hoping you were going to say that. Would you? I guess you've given a lot of resources. You have resources on your social media and on your website. I encourage everybody to check those out. 4,000 Mondays. But Jodi, would you also maybe have one or two things like just today, maybe
Mm.
just a suggestion to try this? Just start here,
Ooh, ooh, ooh.
regardless of where people are in their career.
Yeah. Well, immediately this thing came to my mind around one of what I call, it's like the low hanging fruit in the world of positive psychology. And it's called positive anticipation. It's having something to look forward to. So my immediate, like just a quick hit, because I don't know about you, but I just want like quick grabs. I don't want to work for my happiness. I mostly kid. Is look at your calendar, and you kind of want to rig your life again so that you have something to look forward to every week, month, and year ahead. So it's always kind of moving along, right? And it does not need to be like, oh, I'm going to Malta to film that movie. Like, well, that would be great. However, let's also be more realistic and say that could be maybe the thing in the year, like a bigger thing. But it could be that you're just really looking forward to going and having coffee with that long lost friend you haven't caught up with in a long time, right? Or that you are going to, watch the next show that comes out that you've been dying to watch that's been released, right? Or you're going to go to the movie, or something in the calendar that and again, only you know what it will take for you to feel like it's something to look forward to, but it doesn't need to be high budget, high time constraint or resource. Because again, like I told you earlier, I'm looking forward to Thai food on Friday night. And that is very manageable for time and money and so on. So have something to look forward to a week, a month, a year in advance is one. And then the second thing, I always come back to this. This shall be no surprise, but befriend the Reaper. Do not shy away. I mean, obviously, if he's like knocking on your door, don't answer. But in general, go after him, like pursue a friendship with him, because acknowledging and regularly practicing memento mori, which is that notion of, yep, I'm in touch with it. Yep, I get it. Yep. Oh, I'm counting my Mondays. That's the very animating thing that can get you to get up and on and out and doing the things, as hard or scary or as interesting or riveting that they may be. Again, mortality is the motivator. So let's use it to our advantage.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This is so powerful. I love what you're doing. And I'm so grateful that you took the time to be here. And I know it's going to make a big difference. So thank you. And I'll keep in touch, but keep doing what you're doing because it's powerful.
Oh, I appreciate it. It's been so great chatting with you. Thank you.
Same to you. Thank you.